Welcome back to ADHD Realities. I'm your host, Leanne Borneman, sexologist and certified sex therapist and ADHD expert. Buckle up because today's episode is basically one long hyper-focused tunnel, and we loved every minute of it. I'm joined by Annika Angelo, an ADHD nutrition research expert, and we totally nerded out during this session for well over an hour. Breaking down all the confusing and frankly shamey stuff we've been told about food and ADHD. We dig into sugar cravings, dyes, gluten, binge eating, and why sometimes sitting down for a full plate just doesn't work for our brains. Spoiler, it's not that you're doing it wrong, your brain just might be working differently. If you've ever felt food guilt as an ADHDer or parent, this episode is packed with, oh, that makes total sense moments. So let's get into it. Welcome back to ADHD Realities. I have here today Annika Angelo, and I'm really excited because we're going to be talking about a very popular topic, ADHD and nutrition. And you're just quite honestly just super smart. So I'm going to nerd out like always. So if you want to just introduce yourself to everybody before we get into all the awesome stuff we're going to kind of uncover today.
Thanks for having me on here. So, like you said, my name's Annika. I'm an ADHD nutrition research expert, meaning I have read almost all of the research there is out there on the specific area of ADHD. And it is honestly, there's a lot of stuff that's said out there that is not true. That is something that I'm excited to talk to you about today because we're just gonna bust a lot of the online rhetoric. So.
Yeah, and like I was telling you before, I have to be completely honest to everyone listening. This is very selfish of me because I'm a mom and I'm a mom of children with ADHD. I have ADHD myself, and the misconceptions around the topic of nutrition and ADHD, I think, is one of the bigger outlets of shame and guilt I've experienced as a mom because I feel like that's just an area that I don't know enough about. And you have pediatricians and providers that kind of repeat similar things, and then you don't know who to trust and what are you doing and how are you supporting your kids the best way you can. So any parents out there listening, this is definitely going to be a very helpful exploration of information today. And with that being said, I think I'm going to be very selfish here and go straight to the first thing I think all of us would probably be thinking of. Can we talk about sugar?
Oh, always. I love sugar.
Yay! So go for
So,
it.
yeah, I mean, just thinking about my whole life, I don't know if you've had the same experience, but sugar has just been such a huge part of it. What I've noticed is that people with ADHD tend to have either a lot of salt memories or a lot of sugar memories. I'm one of the girls who have a lot of sugar memories.
Uh-huh.
So, there was this one time I was making it was a pyramid for a project out of sugar cubes. And my mom was like, you can have max 2 sugar cubes if you really, really want them. And guess what I did?
Did you eat them all?
I wish I did. Um, but I made like a hole essentially in the middle so I could like have those like extra cubes that because like she had it all out, like the number that we were going to be able to use to like make it perfect,
Oh, so you already
right?
knew. You knew which ones you could put aside for yourself, and it definitely wasn't just two.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so I hid the fact I mean, she probably knew, let's be honest. Not a lot goes
Fair.
out of mom's.
Pick your battles, right, moms? Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, just that intense desire for sugar all the time, right? That is a classic experience. And I think the first thing to know is that that's normal and that's not a bad thing. A lot of us have been told that sugar cravings are a bad thing and that having too much sugar is going to harm us. And the truth is, yeah, like too much sugar, not a good thing.
Hmm.
Too much of anything is not a good thing. That's why we have our dietary guidelines telling us to only have about 25 to 50 grams of added sugar a day. Are a lot of us doing that? Maybe not.
For those of you
So,
not watching this video, I just totally shook my head in guilt. Mm-mm.
but the thing is, it's just different for people with ADHD. that is what's missing from the conversation about sugar. Because for some reason, we see that the cerebral glucose metabolism in our brains is about 8% less effective. And also weird, it apparently is worse for females. So
Now,
if you have
really
female
quickly, I'm
hormones,
just
oh,
curious because I'm
yes.
not a nerd in this respect. Is that like the process in the brain that's breaking down and or like processing? Like, what are we talking about when you use that amazing word right there?
Yeah, so typically when we do brain scans, we can tell the different usages of different types of things in our brains. A common thing is how people can figure out the white matter and the gray matter in the brain, right?
Okay.
And that is usually a helpful understanding. But what we see is when we do those brain imaging for people with ADHD on average, especially in the prefrontal cortex, the usage of glucose, which is that energy that we use for our brain, is significantly lower slash it's just not used effectively.
Hmm.
It's a little bit different for a lot of different people, which is why it's not a great marker and why we can't use brain scans as a marker for
Yeah.
ADHD,
Even though it sounds really
unfortunately.
great in theory, right?
Right. Wouldn't that just be so
Would
helpful?
be. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the research doesn't support that. However, essentially, what we mean by we just don't process glucose as effectively, it's really just meaning our brain, it doesn't use it in the way it's supposed to. Either it uses it too much, or it uses it in the wrong areas of the brain, or it just doesn't understand how to use it very well. And so it's just kind of free floating and not working out very well.
Mm, fair. Okay. So when you're talking about then sugar and how, because that rang true for me growing up. Like I was always a candy person. My son, candy, like he'll choose candy over a meal. My daughter is very similar, and it's not necessarily because he's not interested in the chicken. He loves the chicken just as much, but it's the candy's always that go-to. So when we're talking about ADHD, are you able to dive into a little bit of why we see that pattern? Is it because of this
Yeah.
glucose that you're talking about?
So that is the predominant theory right now in the ADHD nutrition research space.
Got it.
That
Okay.
mainly because our brains just process it ineffectively. It sends signals saying, hey, actually, we need more sugar because our brain is like, whoa, what's going on? We're using too
Interesting.
much energy. Therefore,
Huh.
like our brain is like, okay, well, I need more of this to give me more energy because sugar is that fastest form of energy to our brain.
That is so interesting. Now, here is my next question. I don't know if I'm jumping here, but like, okay, so I know growing up, and I still hear it now, like people saying like sugars are just making ADHD worse in terms of your symptoms and how you're presenting. Is there truth to this? Because I've heard the misconception of like there is truth and there isn't truth. Are you only allowed to have a certain amount of sugar? So maybe you're able to give insight on that. Does the research actually support sugar, yes, causing ADHD symptoms to be worse?
Yeah, so the really interesting thing here is that sugar consumption is only associated with ADHD diagnosis, but it's not associated with ADHD severity. So that is something that is the
Interesting.
one thing that's missing from the conversation. So a lot of people will say, oh, sugar and ADHD are connected. Yes, they are, but it's not the severity that's connected. It's simply the diagnosis. And that comes back to how are we talking about how our brain are using
Hmm.
that, like the glucose, the sugar.
Yeah.
So it's more likely that the person with ADHD simply has a higher need for sugar than the general population. Because we also see that even though we eat more sugar than the general population does,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't translate to an increase in ADHD severity. And that is the key here. Fascinating stuff, right?
That is like so mind blowing because that just basically put aside every grandparent and parent and person out there who's said don't have more lollipops because your ADHD is going to go rampant. Like the fact that research does not show the severity link yet is just mind blowing. I mean, it's very interesting though, because now my head's going, and this is probably not your domain, so don't bother answering it, but I'm going to spew, this idea of energy. Is that a thing? Like, us ADHDers, do we need more energy because of just how our brain is processing or the lack of processing in certain areas? Like, oh, my head's gonna go down a tunnel now, but definitely interesting. So,
Yeah, that is something that I'm like, that's my hypothesis that the ADHD brain, it just tends to, for some reason, overprocess a lot of different
mm,
things. Like when we look at the brainwave research, we tend to see, what is it? I think it was increases in alpha post, or no, it was decreases. I am not going to, don't quote me on
don't,
any of this,
don't
but
worry
in
about it. I'm not
general,
a stat girl either. You're good.
in general, what we see is that people with ADHD both have difficulties in filtering out information as well as having difficulties in just so like filtering it out and then also taking it in.
Makes
So
sense.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Wow. Whew. This is very,
That's
ooh.
our experience, right? And so essentially the brain is working harder than it's supposed to when it's trying to
Yeah.
focus.
Well, that's why I made that comment because I know the energy out, okay, wow. Ooh, this is so interesting. I'm loving this. Okay, wait. So now I'm going to go down a path. So, what sugars, because like you just said, like it's not a bad thing to have sugars. We have dietary, guidelines. Are there any sugars that have been advised that are worse, better? You know where I'm going with this, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So that's definitely where the nuance comes in, right? Because this is not an advocacy for, hey, you should just give your kids a ton of sugar and they'll be fine. Because the truth is that's not good,
Fair.
right? Like I
As a
said, we
mom
have
here,
our
I'll say
dietary
fair.
guidelines.
Yeah.
And so for a kid, the dietary guidelines is about 15 to 25 grams of added sugar, and that's not a lot.
It's not. I feel like such
It's,
a bad mom right now. Oh my gosh, I'm looking inward right now. Keep going. Keep going.
I mean, but the thing is, it's hard, right? Like, even for us as an adult, how do we just consume 25 to 50 grams of added sugar a day, like max?
Mm-hmm.
That's so hard. The biggest thing here is reducing sugar sweetened beverages.
So like sodas,
So think
juices,
sodas, chocolate milk even, like that can have
really?
a
Oh, the
lot
syrup.
of
Okay, make it.
added sugar to it.
Okay.
So those are where we find the biggest culprits of added sugar. And super interestingly, even though the research consistently shows that sugar in general doesn't increase ADHD, we do see sugar sweetened beverages do. Like
Increase
that
severity or increase.
severity,
Okay,
yes.
okay. Oh wow. So they've been able to see some sort of relationship there though.
Right. So there's
Wow.
only an association right now
Hmm.
because unfortunately it is unethical to make kids drink a ton of juice or chocolate milk or soda and then
Uh-huh.
measure their dopamine levels. Right? That's kind of unethical. However, we do have a study that came out in 2024. Very preliminary study. It only had 3 participants, and there's a lot of like confounding variables like expectation effects. But they found that reducing sugar sweetened beverage intake decreased their ADHD symptom severity from frequently on like 3 measures of inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity down to rarely, which is incredible.
Interesting. So here's my question, and I don't know if you know this, but what would be the difference in terms of the type of sugar or chemical reaction in those items versus other areas of added sugar that may not have been able to find associations like that?
Yeah, I'd say there's about 3 main theories here. So the first theory is definitely when we are consuming high, like sweetened sugared beverages, we tend to just go over the added sugar limit.
Because
And
it's
like,
good.
yeah. So like say a 12-ounce soda, that is about 30 grams of added sugar. So that is way over a kid's added sugar for the day.
This
So
is why,
that's
yeah, this is why Mama Bear over here puts the cup filled with ice like all the way to the top, like Starbucks likes to do. And then I just put a little soda in, and it's probably not even half a cup worth. And my children are getting what they want. in small doses, but
Nice.
12 ounces, 30 something grams of sugar. Oh my Lanta.
Yeah, and that's like where it just adds up so quickly for our bodies because like we're not even noticing it because when we drink, it doesn't feel like we're consuming anything, right?
No. Anyone like just listening to this on an audio, you're not seeing my face. It's like my mind is blown right now just because you're touching upon things that we are just doing so naturally in our day to day. We're not thinking about it. And not thinking about it can lead to so many different like conflicts in how we're functioning and how we're, you know, just going about our day. Like this is just eye-opening. Like eye-opening. And we haven't even really touched much about ADHD yet. It's like all on the holy crap, that's a lot of sugar. So I'm sorry. So okay, so that was that theory. Okay, keep going. Sorry. I'm
Yeah.
totally interrupting
So,
you.
second theory is that high dose sugar at one time can impact our dopamine receptor sensitivity. So, that's the second theory. So, we do have evidence that binging can decrease our dopamine receptor sensitivity over time. And in the same theory here, so sugar, high dose sugar is technically binging. So, therefore, it's hypothesized that it can impact our dopamine receptors. Again, it's not something we can study in humans
And
because
that's
that
where this
is
sucks, right? Like, I
right.
get it, ethical standards here, but this is why, like, I'm sure you're well aware that just the associations and where you have to run with associations is it's hard.
Yeah. And we do have evidence in specifically, I think it was a rat study that looked at adding sugar in sugar sweetened beverage type of sugar, and it decreased the dopamine receptor density as well as decreased dopamine overall, specifically in the rodent brain. So now again, while we can't like generalize that to humans, for the most part, a lot of nutrition research is relatively generalizable to humans.
Yeah,
So, like,
the
that is
brain.
so important to know, right? Like,
Yeah.
if it can do that for a rat, like,
What could it possibly do? Like,
yeah,
see, and all this you're talking about is the what ifs, but if we have enough information on what we kind of know is happening in certain domains, you err on the side of caution if you so choose, right? Like that's kind of where it goes down to, and I think you touched upon it already. It's so hard for us to eat a healthy, balanced meal, especially in America. Prices are through the roof. Everything that's processed generally has some sort of sneak peeked added sugar or some other thing. So it is a very hard thing. So you kind of, I guess, would have to pick your battles here. But this information is just so valuable because it's like at least you're given tools to make decisions. Like, prior to this conversation, I wasn't really thinking I mean, I guess I'm always thinking about sugar, but not in the way of like 30s. I'm still stuck on it. I can't even imagine what some of these Starbucks drinks have in them now
oh,
that we're like,
that is the hidden one. So many people don't realize that their Starbucks order is actually 50 milligrams of sugar.
I appreciate that I'm an espresso girl now. Like I truly do. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Can you
Yeah.
imagine like if you're having one of those like venti or grande drinks every day and and that's just your start to your day.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. Wow. So here's okay. So you mentioned binging and it made my
Mhm.
head jump. And I don't know if you have any insight on this. And if you don't, we can definitely move on to a different topic. But I know just from the research when I was doing like prep for finding a topic that I wanted to do for my dissertation, I was really interested in the association of binge eating disorder and ADHD, especially in females. It seems more common. Do you have any information on that in regards to the nutrition piece and like how that goes? Because when you were talking about the glucose in the brain and how things may be short, circuited in terms of how it's processing, it kind of like started making sense because I will be self-disclosed right now. I'm a recovering binge eater. I have binge eating disorder. I say I do because I feel like it's always a lifelong thing. It's not something that I just, woke up and it's gone. And when I got my diagnosis of ADHD and then I saw that, I was like, makes sense.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to throw in the science to back the sense there.
No, it makes so much sense though, because I mean, like you said, there is a huge association. In fact, ADHD is the mental health condition. It's hard, I mean, because it's technically like a neurotype, but it's lumped in the mental
Yeah,
health conditions,
I know.
right?
Yeah, yeah, I gotcha.
So, it's the one that's most associated with binging.
Wow.
So we are at a huge, huge disadvantage already just because we have ADHD to
Yeah.
developing an eating disorder compared to like just the general population and even compared to other mental health diagnoses.
Hmm.
So it's just harder because that's how our brains are wired because binging, well, what does it do? It gives us dopamine. That's why it actually decreases our dopamine receptor sensitivity over time because it increases the amount of dopamine in our brain so much, so quickly, which then when we do that too often, it can decrease our brain's ability to respond to the dopamine because it expects that to happen.
Yeah. And then I'm thinking to myself, the other fun deficit that we experience is the inability to be really aware in the moment, that self-awareness piece. So that's another reason why after the fact, we can feel so guilty after we've binged, right? Like it's you
Yeah.
got what you needed. And then afterwards, you're in that post-reflection phase and you just feel like absolute shit, like horrible. This is like kind of like depressing, but like it's also very helpful to be very mindful of indeed, like if you have ADHD and you're struggling with any of this, you're not alone. Like you're not. And I'm just, I'm happy we're talking about this.
Yeah,
Um,
it's unfortunately so common.
yeah,
Unfortunately, because like it seriously, like we said, it can increase your ADHD severity over time while at the same time being associated with ADHD. So it's like a double whammy.
yeah, and then I think to myself too, I think one of the reasons why a lot of us, and this is my theory, this is kind of what I spew in my own little practice, but I think the other piece of it too is not just like how our brains are wired, but then the type of experiences we're having in the social settings and how much more likely we are to experience anxiety or depression due to feeling like we're not being seen or validated. And those types of feelings always lead to negative coping mechanisms, right? And so if you're already kind of wired to be more at risk of those types of behaviors and interactions, now that's just amplified because of the social piece as well. And it could become a very big cycle. Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also really important, like if you are in the binging cycle, understanding where is that coming from? Because yeah, like it could be coming from that emotional instability or the social aspect of like, okay, you just like went to all this and now you're overthinking everything. And now you're like, okay, this is so, I just need to comfort myself.
Yeah.
This is the way to quiet the noise in my head.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people with ADHD have a lot of food noise in general too. And eating, sometimes that can help with the food noise itself.
Yeah.
And so there's that half. But then what if it's not stemming from that? What if it's just stemming from your interoception issues, like what you were talking about before?
Yeah.
The fact that a lot of us don't have fullness cues until it's way too late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's like what's so frustrating about all of this. And why I say frustrating is because I always like to tell people, like, have you ever seen Shrek?
Yes.
Okay, so like you know how he says he's like an onion, he has all these layers. Well, I feel like
Yeah.
that's like us ADHDers. There's so many different layers that you have to really unpack and understand because you just brought them up. Like there's the brain piece, there's the social piece, but then there's the brain piece again. And everyone experiences things so differently. You know, ADHD, cool diagnosis, but like how it presents and how everyone's anatomy is just can vary from person to person. So this is like why I say it's so frustrating because it's exhausting to try to figure all this out as an ADHD, and we're already struggling with exhaustion, like we started this whole conversation out to talk about.
Yeah. And I think that's the other aspect of binging. Usually, binging comes from executive dysfunction in general with food. Because what are we going to do when we've gone through our entire day mentally exhausted? Are we going to have the effort to create some amazing food and like a very well portioned dinner? No, we're going to just go into our freezer and make a bunch of, I don't know, pot stickers or something. Not to say pot stickers are bad. Like pot stickers, they have a great profile. But like,
They got some sodium in them things though.
yeah, good for me. I have pots.
Oh, there you
But
go.
uh, but yeah, like it's just the fact that when we get to the end of our day, it can just be so emotionally like our brain's just not there to create well-informed decisions because our brain has been making decisions the entire day.
I have food paralysis. So like food decision paralysis. I'm the worst. My husband likes to always ask me what do I want, and no matter how many times we've been in this cycle because his working memory deficit is par, we always go down this route and I'm like, I don't know. And I literally break down, I shut down. So this idea even of like thinking to cook something, I struggle just thinking what do I want, let alone having the energy to compile all the ingredients, figure out what I'm making for myself, my children. It is so hard. And I think that's another thing. And I don't know if like you experience this as well. Like I feel like our family, we're very much takeout people more than food eating, like actually in the home. Like we try, but even when we try, it's like the real easy, like pasta or like frozen chicken fingers or pop it in the air fryer. Like to get a nice, decent meal in my house, like it's a rarity.
Yeah, and that is such a common experience too. Like, I mean, I'm one of the anomalies because I have a very neurotypical partner. And he helps me just like stay on top of everything. He makes me go do grocery shopping with him every week. We like plan the different meals every week. And honestly, that's the one thing I can say that is so helpful.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
when I was living by myself, it was bad. Literally so bad.
yeah.
And I don't think that's talked enough about either because there's a lot of shame that comes with food and ADHD. Like for me,
Hmm.
I know I cannot live alone because if I do, my fridge looks like a haunted house pretty much
Fair. Cobwebs and all.
of like a lot of mold in soup or something like that. Like
We need
there's
to talk
so
more about
much.
that for a second. I know you're not here. You're the researcher expert over here, and we're talking about fucking fridges and mold right now. But I'm just gonna take a moment and just emphasize me freaking too. Can I tell you how often object permanence of the refrigerator is a real thing? Things in there are just moldy. And I'll be even honest on top of this. There's that then task paralysis because you know it's a task upon a task. It's not just taking the damn thing out of the refrigerator, it becomes a whole thing. Then you have to unpack it. Do you put it in the garbage? Because now do you want your refrigerator to smell like shit? Like, or now are you going to wash it? Are you going to be able to handle it because you have sensory issues? Like, I just self disclosed so many times of what goes on in my head when I have to clean the fridge, but I just needed to validate the fact that I feel like that is needs to be spoken about more. Like
Yeah,
ADHDers, fridges and food that has mold in it, but you having a partner that is able to help like keep you accountable in that area is so yes, helpful.
it's definitely
And
more of a he does it for me. So he is just
fair.
accommodating me all the time. And it's incredible. And I hope for that for every single person. Because, like,
Yeah,
if you have ADHD and your partner's not accommodating your ADHD, that is, if I had a red flag, I'd be waving that right now.
fair. And for me, my husband, we both have ADHD. So like he presents very differently than me, thankfully, because if we both presented the same way, I think our house would be literal more chaos than it is. But like he's able to do the things that I can't, and I'm able to show up in the ways that he can. And then the times that we're both not able to, we have such self-compassion for each other because we understand that in that moment, that's exactly how we're accommodating each other. Just breathe.
Mm.
It's okay. It's fine, right? Okay, sorry. My ADHD got us on a totally other tangent, but it's a good one. So
Yeah,
here's now my question. What about dyes? What about red
guys.
dyes? All of the things that we also know are on our kids' foods and all the candies and other things. This kind of goes into the sugar. Is there truth to this? Did research prove it? Like, are there certain dyes that truly are connected and yes, 100% cause and or affect severity in ADHD?
Ooh, so good question. This is one that I actually love talking about because I have actually read literally every single study there is on food dye and ADHD/hyperactivity because I want to make sure I know the stuff, right?
Uh-huh.
So the thing is, when we look at the actual literature with ADHD and with food dyes, we see that about 8% of kids respond with additional hyperactivity or additional inattention with food dyes. Interestingly, this is the same statistic for the general population.
Okay, make that make sense.
Right. Yeah. So,
Sorry, my brain just went, huh?
yeah, that's the really interesting part here. So, it's not necessarily that it's impacting ADHD, it means there's something else going on. So, for those 8% of kids who experience increases in ADHD-like symptoms, it's not necessarily that it is impacting ADHD. It's more that it's impacting something else. And what we found out in, I think it was 2014, they looked at the genetics of people who responded to it and who didn't. They found differences in specifically histamine gene polymorphisms. So essentially, what we can get out of all of this is that people, about 8% of the population, has an allergic reaction to food dyes.
Okay, so that's kind of where the science is heading, that if you are showing these increases to inattention or hyperactivity, it's more of like an allergy, if you will.
Exactly. And that is the thing that no one really knows.
Wow.
And the other thing is that we don't see it affecting us as we get older. And the reality is likely because as we get older, our body composition increases, right? And so we are able to handle higher doses of different things in the same way that
Right.
adults can handle 25 to 50 milligrams of added sugar a day. Kids should only handle about 15 to 25 milligrams or grams of added sugar a day.
Okay, that makes total sense. And this is like where your brain starts going because the research isn't that like telling you this, but when you're able to know little things from different directions, it makes sense. But this is really interesting because I think, for me, when I've heard the whole food dye narrative, I never knew this. And I'm sure whoever's listening right now probably didn't know this. If you did, kudos, you're on point. But like, I always kind of also was under the assumption that regardless of who ingested it, would then also have an effect of it. And what you're telling me is that the research just does not support that idea.
Yeah, which is just fascinating. And so when people say to just eliminate those and it's going to help ADHD for all the kids, no, it's really not.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm on parent groups because I'm a mom on Facebook and stuff. And I can't tell you anytime I see like a post about ADHD, especially parents that are looking into possible medication management for their children, the first like 10 comments are always food, take out the dyes, do this, do that. And, again, I think it's great to make changes, especially if those things that you were allowing may not necessarily be the healthiest, but like the idea that that in itself may be the answer, I think honestly just places us more into this space of like failure. And failure is not something us ADHDers are very good with because we grew up with it all. I mean, I can't speak to other people, but every client I've ever met and everybody I know who has ADHD, we all have kind of similar stories with that. And so when we're being told that, yeah, just remove it as if that's going to truly help, I can't even imagine the type of shame and guilt that kind of comes up for people with this misinformation.
Yeah. And that's the other hard, nuanced aspect of this conversation because, artificial food dyes, are they adding anything to us? Honestly, no.
They just
They
look
make
pretty.
us eat more of the types of food that they're coming in, at least
Mhm.
some people. And so the other thing is how much is going to harm us. So that's the thing that's missing as well from the conversation too, because when we look at the harm, it doesn't come until you eat way too much of it. Like you would probably get more harm from just overeating before you would get harm from the food dye itself.
Yeah.
So, like, that's the other thing too. And then the other part here is that, I mean, ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder.
Mm,
Some of those kids' safe foods are ones that have food dye in it.
yeah. Yeah. You're right. There's a lot of nuance and barriers to that type of conversation. And I think that's why I brought that specific piece up because I feel like while the science definitely is trying to do better and I appreciate it, we still have a lot of uh, autonomy in terms of the decisions we have to make, not really knowing what's going to work and what's not going to work. And there's so many different experiences. And if you're somebody that is ingesting food dyes because that's the only kind of food that you're able to eat, the idea that you're basically going to be in worse case than not, it's not helpful and it's also not accurate apparently. So let's not do that anymore, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other really thing we talked about with the histamine aspect, if for some reason your kid does respond to the food dye, like if you give them a starburst or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, and you notice their increases in hyperactivity happen, or you feel like their behavior is different, it might actually just be a histamine response. Like maybe your kid is just overproducing histamine from this. And if that happens, maybe that's something that could be helpful to bring up to your physician instead, like your kid's pediatrician.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so instead of seeing it as a way to reduce your kids' ADHD, maybe view it as a trial to see if your kid has allergic reactions or is more sensitive to their environment.
Fair. And honestly, this conversation is bringing me into the next piece that I was thinking of is I've also heard a lot of a conversation about gluten. And that's kind of what you just reminded me of because that's what people generally do, right? Like when you start noticing reactions in your body, you start removing certain things. I know doctors tell you it all the time. You know, are is gluten actually a thing for ADHD brains, or is this just like another wellness industry myth that is circulating across platforms? Do you know?
Yeah, that's like such a hard conversation because a lot of people who go gluten-free feel very strongly about it. And the reason for that is because it does work for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's incredible for them. However, statistically, it doesn't help ADHD, which is unfortunate. So again, it kind of goes more to that allergic response. So what we see with the literature is that even though gluten, celiac disease, so like gluten intolerance and celiac disease, they're not associated with ADHD. However, when people who have celiac stop taking gluten, we actually see decreases in ADHD symptoms to the point of non-clinical diagnosis ability. Like
Wow.
basically you can get rid of your ADHD if you have celiac disease, potentially, which means it's more of a celiac disease response rather than an actual neurological disorder.
Fair. And that goes into why I hear people more and more talking about the misdiagnosis, right? Where a lot of things can look like ADHD. And I'm waiting for research to really amp up on this, but I think you just spoke volume to that because and I just want people to be clear. She did not say it removes ADHD. She said that what we're seeing is that those that may have had ADHD presentation, those presentations get removed when gluten is removed, which means it may not have then actually been ADHD all along. It may have just been how the person was presenting because of the intolerance. Correct?
Exactly. And so that is something that not a lot of physicians know, and it could be actually helpful for anybody who has an ADHD diagnosis to also test for celiac.
Mm,
Because if they actually have celiac instead of ADHD, well, there you go,
that's
right?
very interesting. That's really awesome. Wow. I was not prepared for that at all. Now, I don't mean to jump ship on that one, but the next thing that goes to my mind, I'm thinking of all the things that we ingest that are typically talked about all the time in nutrition in general, and also this form of like how it then affects us. I've heard things about dairy or elimination diets, and how there's evidence that this is going to cure ADHD or it's going to, I know, I just made you go.
Girl, you know, I hate that.
I know. And I
Oh,
had I had to talk about it because for anyone that does not know you, you are the queen of breaking down misinformation on social media, which I absolutely love. And you don't just come in with a narrative, you come in with the facts, you come in with the science. So, science away, girl, because I would love to know more about this one.
heck yeah. So let's take a little trip down ADHD food lane. Back
Love
in
it.
1975, that's when the Feingold diet was first introduced. And that was the first treatment using food for ADHD in the research. What they found was that people who went on the Feingold diet did improve some of their ADHD symptoms. Not all of them did, but enough did that it started to get recommended for kids with ADHD in the system. However, it unfortunately did not account for the fact that it can increase eating disordered behavior or it can cause stress. It it's hard.
Mm,
Like it eliminates so many important things and it eliminates a lot of joy.
yeah.
Like let's be real, when you can't have a cupcake like
Yeah.
and you're at a
Mm,
party, like that's horrible.
yeah. That's okay. This is making sense. Keep going. I'm loving this.
So since then, there's been a lot more interest in that, right? Back in 2011, we had one that came out of the Netherlands, and it looked at an elimination diet versus just a control diet, where they like didn't tell them anything. They were just like, "Hey, here you go. Just follow like these
Hmm.
general things. We'll get back to you about other stuff later."
Yeah.
And what they found was that the kids who went on the elimination diet, approximately 64% of them had reductions in their symptoms. Interestingly, I don't know why the researchers did it that way, but I explain this so much better in one of my posts, but the way that they calculated the statistic, I think that they calculated it incorrect. And so really it should have been only about 40 to 45% of the
Hmm.
kids improved with the elimination diet. And that is closer to so there was a meta-analysis that came out that looked at all of the elimination diets and how they affected ADHD. And we find that for about 30% of kids, an elimination diet is effective in reducing ADHD symptoms, which that means about 70% of kids don't improve with an elimination diet.
And so here's where my thoughts go though too, and I don't know if you have the answer to this, but those studies that you just referenced, how did they know the children had ADHD? Was it self-reported? Was it an actual diagnosis? Who diagnosed them? Because my mind is going back to the conversation we just had about how, if you have a tolerance and you start eliminating certain things, could that also have an effect? And are you being mindful for those types of variables? Like my head is just was going as you were kind of running through this. I'm just curious that diagnosis piece. Do you know?
Yeah, so for all of these studies, at least the 2011, they did have a diagnosis, and then they also had parent and teacher ratings.
Okay.
That was another negative of the 2011 study. The teachers were not blinded. So
Mm,
they knew if the kid was on the elimination diet or not,
fair.
which is not helpful
Yeah.
because then there's the expectation effect, right? Like we want to eliminate expectation effects as much as possible. And so that was just, yeah.
Interesting. All right.
Thankfully, there was back in 2022, no, actually, it was released in 2023. It was done in 2022. And it was called the TRACE study. So the TRACE study was the first study to look at the difference between an elimination diet and a healthy diet for ADHD. So the healthy diet, basically, they just taught the parents how to do the dietary guidelines of the country that we're in. I believe they were following the Dutch guidelines there. Uh, but yeah. So the healthy diet, elimination diet. Again, just like with the meta-analysis, they found that it helped about 30% of the kids. However, they found that the healthy diet helped about 50% of the kids, which is incredible.
A lot more.
Uh-huh. It's so much more. Like so much
And
more.
my head just like goes to again, I'm going into the clinical realm and I'm so sorry to do this to everybody, but like I think to myself of like, okay, cool, you have a diagnosis. Well, we don't have a genetic testing for ADHD. We don't have brain scans for ADHD the way that whatever. So they're all left up to psychiatrists, therapists, neuropsychologists. Neuropsychologists obviously gold standard, but if you're not like trauma informed, how much does trauma affect the brain, right? How
Oh
much
yeah.
does then the food that you're intaking, like, is it really ADHD? So, like, this is where, like, I love science, but then I get, like, so bummed because I can only imagine all the variables, and I'm sure limitations was definitely outlined in these uh, research, but, like, basically what I'm hearing is that at the end of the day, healthy eating is the win for a lot of things outside of just ADHD. But individuals then like because I know that I see people on social media talking about elimination diets or for instance, foods that like trigger ADHD or ADHD triggers. You're smirking. Did I trigger you?
Oh, yep.
Go for it.
Not gonna
Take the
lie.
wheel. What are they? Like what why? I think my thing is like where do these people come up with this stuff? Like is it like a selling point? Are they trying to sell supplements or some shit or a nutritional plan that just somehow like finds a nice little package bow to make all this make sense?
In my experience, yeah, that is usually the
Oy, oy.
thing. Like, essentially, whenever you see a person online sharing, whether it's a study or just general random advice about ADHD and nutrition, it tends to come from people who are trying to sell you something to help your ADHD, whether that is a brain health supplement or whether that is some nutrition coaching or something else. Because unfortunately, fear sells.
Yeah. Oh, that hit home. So would you say then that there are have has science been able to support there are certain types of foods that are ADHD triggers then, or are we just not there yet? Or ingredients, foods, ingredients, kind of the whole thing.
Yeah, we are getting there. I'd say in general, our best research comes from what is going to actually help ADHD through addition. That is where most of our research is finding helpful information because,
Okay.
excuse me, taking out foods doesn't help a ton of people, but adding specific foods does help a ton of people. So, one of the most interesting things, for example, is antioxidants. What we see is that even though people with ADHD consume on average the same amount of antioxidant-rich foods, we actually see the antioxidant markers are different and they're lower in the people with ADHD. Therefore, what that means is that people with ADHD on average actually need to consume more fruits and vegetables than the average person,
Interesting. Does that go back
which,
to like what we were talking about earlier about how the chemicals are processing or like how things are shortened in terms of the wiring?
yeah, it's very complicated. And even I don't completely understand it because
Fair.
they didn't dive into like why this difference could
Yeah.
be. We do see that ADHD medication specifically does improve oxidative stress markers, though, so that could be a potential improvement as well.
Okay.
So, like, we know that like ADHD medication is the gold star for a reason. And one of those reasons is that it continually shows in the research how it improves the metabolism of different nutrients in our bodies, how it improves just our brain structure, our brain waves. It's incredible for the people who can tolerate it, which is about 70% of people. So,
That's
yeah.
interesting because now when you were talking about like focusing more on what you're ingesting, that's helpful to the support and how you're processing. So, like for instance, I take magnesium. I've heard great things. I will be completely honest with you. I am. I did not open up a peer-reviewed article at all when I said, sure, I'll take some magnesium. Although
Well,
I've
you'll
been
be sad
taking
to
it.
know there is literally no research on magnesium supplementation in ADHD. There's two, and they were
Okay.
both, one was with magnesium and vitamin B6, and one was with magnesium and vitamin D. So there's nothing with just magnesium, so I couldn't even tell you if it helps.
Okay, fair. Because like I don't know, maybe I'm under the placebo effect because I feel like I concentrate better. I am able to sleep better. Um, so maybe I'm under the placebo effect.
I
Who
mean,
knows?
it is true that people with ADHD are more likely than the neurotypical population to be magnesium deficient. So, making sure that we're not as magnesium deficient likely will help,
Makes
mainly
sense.
just because our body is more at a homeostasis, right? So, like, that would make sense
Fair. Yeah, that
because,
actually makes sense. Yeah, when you're looking at it that way. I didn't know that either. So that makes sense. Okay. I'm gonna still take my
yeah,
magnesium, huh? Huh.
the most recent study found that about 80% of people with ADHD are magnesium deficient.
Wow. That's very interesting. Now I'm going to go down a deep tunnel after this and start reading about magnesium and other things. So I know we're almost close to time here, and I do have to ask because I feel like I've seen you talk about it a couple of times on your page, alcohol.
Mm,
And I'm bringing it up because I am somebody that likes to occasionally drink. I know a lot of my clients are drinkers. I see a very big relationship between alcohol and ADHD, more so not just like ADHD symptoms, but like a lot of individuals I work with who have ADHD tend to be drinkers, or, we also have the literature on substance use, especially alcohol. What do we know about alcohol? Because I know recently I've been here again. I did not care to give my energy and attention to deep dive, but I've heard like uh alcohol is considered like a cancer carcinogenic or something like that. It causes cancer, this and that. So when it comes to ADHD in general, anything? What do you think?
yeah. Oh, thanks for bringing that up because I guess like I totally forgot that, yeah, that technically is something that a lot of us ingest. So me, I just don't ingest it anymore.
Fair, okay.
And that's mainly because I've learned all about the research with how it affects our brain and our body. So I'm not going to be here and telling everybody to completely cut out alcohol because that's not feasible for a lot of people, especially if
Mhm.
you're unmedicated. If you don't have medication, it's going to be really, really hard because for a lot of people with ADHD, they self-medicate using alcohol. I mean, I don't know about your experience. Maybe talk about that. What is your experience with alcohol when you drink it?
When I drink it, I get ditzy, but it's something that I generally used to go to for like calming me down for being overwhelmed, overstimulated. I we live in a world now where I don't care if anyone knows this, but like pot, weed, like that was also my go-to, to calm myself down until I really started better understanding of how to like set my environments up to like minimize the things that were causing me to go in that direction. But yeah, I'll admit, like those were my go-to for a lot of my management to those overstimulation, feeling very just out of touch kind of thing. So when it came to drinking though, I I noticed as I've gotten older, I get like I feel sick the next day. Like that only happened when I would overdrink. But now, like if I have a glass of wine or something, like I just feel gross afterwards, or my sleep gets affected. I don't get very good sleep. I toss and turn. I may be able to pass out, but I toss and turn a lot. But outside of that, I don't really necessarily, I don't know, like I'm trying to reflect now because I also haven't had a drink in a while. But yeah.
Yeah, well, all of those areas that you talked about is exactly part of why it's definitely recommend to not drink, especially the sleep aspect, because people with ADHD already tend to have a higher risk for sleep disorders or disordered sleeping. And then when you add on the alcohol to it, that continues to disrupt our circadian rhythms and it continues to make it
Hmm.
worse for us, which then we also know that worse sleep equals increase in ADHD symptoms the next day. Yeah. which is
Oh
hard.
my gosh, that's making so much. See, I was reflecting like in the moment how alcohol made me feel. And when you just said that, it triggered, yes, it wasn't just feeling sick, it was feeling out of it, like completely disconnected, incapable. Like I was still able to function, but it just felt like I couldn't do the things like I normally could do. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Talk
then
about a
you talked about
poop
feeling
moment.
sick. Interestingly, alcohol is one of the few things that, since you mentioned it, it is a carcinogen. It is a toxin to our bodies at any dose, which is again like why I don't ingest it anymore. If I do, like it's maybe once a year,
Mm-hmm.
but I still feel very sick after taking it. And the reason for that is it's because it's a toxin, our body releases a lot of histamine.
Hmm.
And histamine is this incredible, like incredible thing that our body creates, as well as in a lot of different foods. But it uses that to basically attack anything that is harmful for us. Some people have an overactive histamine response,
Uh-huh.
and then that is not great. So MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome, is a very hard condition that a lot of people might experience, which is hard. But yes, basically that is a reason. So when we have a lot of histamine in our system, we tend to feel sicker. And alcohol also inhibits the release of something called diamine oxidase. And the diamine oxidase is the thing that breaks down histamine. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
so it's
So
a
it's full
double whammy
circle.
here.
It's full circle. And I like how you said, you're not going to be the person to say stop drinking because you're right. Like it goes back to even the food. Like you have to make decisions that are working for you, understanding what the research is saying, and then what you want to do with it, taking your own scan of like what's going on when you're ingesting these certain things, and then determining with your autonomy what can you make? What kind of changes can you make? But I think it is important for us to talk about it because, alcohol is such a social thing, right? And for us ADHDers, and I don't want to paint a broad brush or whatever the saying is, but like not all of us are introverts, right? But there are a lot of us ADHDers that struggle in social settings. So what do we generally
Yeah.
do? We drink to
Alcohol
kind of calm.
literally makes me feel like I can access my emotions.
Yeah,
And so I think that's an experience a lot of people do. Like it just allows you to feel more present.
yeah.
Unfortunately, it's making our ADHD worse in the long run
Mm,
because what we see in the literature, it actually decreases our availability of dopamine overall. So it actually decreases the levels of dopamine we have, as well as it decreases our dopamine receptor sensitivity, meaning not only do we have worse, worse levels of dopamine in our brain, but we also are less receptive to those already lowered levels of dopamine.
fair. And so, what I'm hearing here, and I don't know if you have a guideline for people who are listening, but what I'm hearing here is that there's not a one size approach to managing ADHD when we're looking at medication, life, nutrition, etc. But when we are looking at nutrition, would you say that there is a guideline or a list of foods that we should try to add into our day to day that could be possibly helpful from what you've been able to see in research, for just us parents with kiddos, like any insight you can give us in terms of maybe some changes or additions we could be making when we're thinking of it through an ADHD lens?
Yeah. So I think the most important thing is just understanding what is an ideal ADHD plate. So that is our baseline for how to figure out what to eat. Once we figure that out, it's easier to make decisions later on.
I like
So
that.
the ADHD plate is half of our plate should be fruits and vegetables. A 1/6 of our plate, so I guess 3/6 fruit and vegetables, 1/6 a type of grain or seeds or nuts, and then 2/6 of it is a protein source.
Okay.
A lot of us get this backwards. So a lot of us will have a lot of grains or a lot of starchy carbohydrates. So it kind of like flip-flop the vegetable and fruit side with the grain side. And that is not ideal for us in the long run.
Okay.
So, if anyone wants to reference what I'm talking about and like have a visual, like a picture, just Google the Harvard Healthy Eating Plate and it should pop up.
Okay. Now,
Um,
and you're speaking from an ADHD lens, not necessarily like the general population lens of what is really shown in the research to be more supportive in our terms of our nutrition.
yep.
Okay.
So it was super fascinating. I developed this ADHD plate about probably a year ago. And just I'd say it was maybe 2 months ago when my dietitian friend, her name is Dietitian Gabrielle, she's on a lot of the social medias right now. She's fabulous. She brought up the Harvard Healthy Eating Plate, and I was like, holy shit, no way.
That's what you've been doing. Don't you love it when you find that?
This is what I found in the research for ADHD, and now like an actual
Wow.
smart person organization has affirmed this.
That's awesome though. All right. So what I'm gathering, definitely ADHD plate in mind, good balance between fruits, vegetables, grains, proteins, but also if you can, minimizing the sweetie stuff in terms of the sodas, the juices, certain juices, correct?
Yeah, like
Um,
fruit juices, those are generally good. I mean, in
fair.
general, fruit juices, specifically orange juice, has been shown to improve insulin sensitivity, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it comes with a lot of different extra variables, like what are the additional benefits of
Yeah.
fruit? Polyphenols,
Mm-hmm.
fiber, especially if you have like uh pulp orange juice.
I love pulp.
Oh,
My
me
daughter doesn't.
too.
It's a sensory, it's a
No.
tactile thing for her. She hates
Oh,
it. Yeah.
bummer.
Yeah. No, I love pulp. That's
But
fun.
even like switching from a regular soda to diet soda, like that is going to do significant changes.
Fair. And I like that, everything that we've talked about thus far today is very flexible. Like it's not saying that you have to be this thing and that you're doing it wrong if you're doing it this way. It's here's the information, people. The skies are the limits. Take what you can, do what you can. You're not a superhero, right? Like you got to figure out where you can make the changes, where your energy is for it as well. One of the things that I would love to ask before we end today is just because we've been talking so much about the research, do you specifically feel that like there are really big gaps right now when we're talking about ADHD nutrition research? And if so, where do you see them or feel that they are?
Honestly, the biggest gap is there is almost no research out there on ADHD eating behavior.
Really?
Yeah, it's incredible how little we have. While we do have research on eating disorders and ADHD, honestly, the first study came out in 2025 about eating behavior in ADHD, specifically snacking behavior. So people with ADHD are more likely to engage in snack behavior
Mm-hmm.
that is not directly related to emotional state. Super interesting.
Yeah.
Basically, it's just saying we're more likely to snack throughout our day,
Mm-hmm.
which is that was such a fun research paper to read because that's like one of the recommendations that I have for people
I
to
love how
snack
nerdy you
throughout the
just
day.
got. That was so cute. I love it.
Oh, it's just so fun finding research that finally like emphasizes what I've been telling people based on like
Insane. Yeah.
what I see with so the snacking recommendation is based off of the glucose metabolism. So
Okay.
this associational research study was basically saying that like yeah, people with ADHD tend to do this more often. Therefore, it probably means it's just more helpful for people with ADHD. Like we just go toward what's more helpful for us in general.
My
So,
brain is going right now because I'm all about setting our environments up for success. And what you just said is that the research is able to just recently show there is that association there that we're snackers. Well, maybe even trying to sit down and eat a freaking plate of food is not set up for our success.
mm,
Like, is that
yeah.
really working with our brain or against our brain? Oh my gosh, my brain just went,
Oh,
woo! Seriously, because like I am a snacker. I don't like sitting down. I really struggle with it. In our house,
Me
we just kind
too.
yeah, I can't.
I get anxiety from sitting at a table.
I can't. We have a open walk policy in our house, so we don't have sit down dinners. We've thrown that out the window. I know literature likes to say sitting down with your family is great time, but we make it up in
It
other
is
places.
technically better, yes, for developmental outcomes.
Not when you're
However,
stressed the fuck out. Like
right,
that's
yeah.
creating worse problems, right? My son, he picks, he goes, some people may think we're crazy, but like he likes to put the plate on the floor because he's playing on the floor. And so he'll grab some food as he's interacting with his toys and talking to us and doing things. And that just works for him. And so, like, ending this episode on the fact that, holy crap, just like this idea that nutrition also is set up so neural freaking typically.
Yeah, I honestly, you are like blowing my mind right now. Even like, I didn't even think of that. And I feel like I should have.
Like, oh my gosh. Oh my God. You and I are probably going to have so many side conversations now, but like, holy crap. So here I am saying, I'm not the expert in nutrition, but I'm just going to say now that I've just had that moment of thought, if snacking works for you, use it, but make sure you're using snacks that work for your body, right? Like ingest the food that's needed. Don't force yourself to have to sit down and do things just because other people are telling you that's how it's supposed to look, right? Like even the plate idea, that's a wonderful thing, but maybe if you can't do that, that's okay. Put a 1/6 of grain in a Ziploc baggie and just start munching on grain throughout the
Right,
day.
like an easy way to do that as a snack, it could just be you have an orange, you have a few, I don't know, like you have a slice of bread if you like bread or whatever, and then you have like some cheese sticks.
I like
There you
that.
go.
I don't know if I could stop at just one piece of bread though. I'm a loafer kind of girl.
Mm,
Yeah.
definitely that is something I like. I used to consume a lot of those more like starchy carbohydrates. Um, since like learning more about it and then working on my diet, I have reduced it. And honestly, I have experienced a decrease in ADHD symptoms through my diet, which is again probably associated with that. Like 50% of people experience improvements through going to a healthy
Well,
dietary
well,
recommendations.
keep in
So,
mind too, if your body's not using as much energy trying to break down shit and your body's getting what it needs, it's not using as much energy, which means you're not then going into the state of irritability and going into that form of deficit, right? Like when we're stressed, our symptoms go higher. Well, stress
mhm.
is also pronounced when your body is using more energy to break down foods that may not be meant for
Yeah,
your body. So it makes total
exactly.
sense.
Or just like, I mean, I think about like the keto diet. That is your body in constant stress.
Really? All
Yeah.
right. Wow. Oh my gosh, I have to have you back on because like I can talk to you for like 2.5 freaking hours. I really could. And I feel
Yeah,
like
and I
towards
should
the
probably go eat some food because it is 1:30 here.
fair,
So,
fair, fair, fair. So before we close out, do you have any last comments, statements for people who are listening about ADHD nutrition? Anything that you think is important to leave us with?
yeah. The most important thing is remembering that ADHD at the end of the day is a dynamic disability, which means that every single day is going to be different with how you eat. Therefore, give yourself the grace you need for the day that you are having. If yesterday you were able to eat amazingly, and today you have barely any energy just to even eat a meal, that's okay. That's how ADHD works. It sucks. Just every day is going to be different.
I
Allow
love
for
it.
that.
I love it. Self compassion. I love that we ended on self compassion. I love it. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I feel like I've learned so much, and I will definitely have to have you back again because the research is ever growing, and I just love nerding out with people like you. So you're going to be coming back.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me on. And if anyone who is listening wants to just dive deeper, obviously my YouTube channel, my Instagram, I'm sort of active on TikTok, but not really. But that has a lot of the just general information. I have a free newsletter where I break down research every single week about different topics with ADHD or in general mental health and nutrition. So those are some great free options. But then if you're interested in like actually talking to me or like responding, I don't respond to all my DMs because there's a lot of them. but I always respond to my NutriMind community. It's a paid community. For $13 a month. You get access to my entire library of ADHD nutrition research, just like in really easy digestible format.
That's
I
great.
love Canva. I spend a lot of my time on Canva.
I'm so
But I
guilty of it
also
too.
have like a lot of research on just different things like nutrition for osteoporosis or PMDD, or how to approach burnout with ADHD and how to use different types of tools.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
And
So
I'll
you
put
get
all those
all
links
that.
in my description. So if you're on Apple, they're in the description. If you're on YouTube, they're in the description. Go follow her. She is freaking awesome. I again thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for supporting our community and being a objective voice because I feel like it's very hard to find that these days. And I'm not going to get political. I'm not going to get into my spiel about how people are trying to profit off of our community.
Maybe
So
next time.
yeah, next time, right? I just want to say thank you because it really means a lot to know that there are other people out there just trying to help and support our community. So thank you again.
And thank you for all of your help that you've given me.
Of course, of
Probably
course.
weird to say on like a podcast, but like, girl, we've talked like so much about like sexuality, how we can approach different things with our partners, and
Yep.
honestly, it's been so helpful.
I'm
It's
so
so helpful.
happy. It's an exchange of helpfulness. It's a community, right? It's a village. We're there for each other. So thank you again. And until next time, everyone, be well. And that's a wrap on our deep dive hyper focus session. If you're still reeling from the sugar facts or realizing your fridge might also be haunted by forgotten leftovers, just know, totally same. But huge thank you to Annika for breaking down the science in a way that actually makes sense for our ADHD brains. If this episode gave you a little more clarity or helped you feel a little less alone in the chaos of trying to eat right with ADHD, then that is a freaking win. Be sure to check the episode description for all links to Annika's work, including her newsletter and NutriMind community, because let's be real, we all need a research translator in our lives. Until next time, keep showing your self-compassion, eat the damn snack, and remember, your ADHD doesn't make you broken. It just means the rules might need to bend for your brain. And as always, it's all about setting your environments, your relationship, and your sex up for success. Until next time, be well.